Hello everybody, my name is Star Raptor. Welcome to the channel. It's been a while since I've been making videos, and that's for good reason. I've been overseas at Star Wars Celebration 2023, Europe, in London at the Excel Center, and I also went to a couple countries after that as well. So I have so many comics to catch up on. We're not going to go into too much detail because I have 10 comics that I want to at least touch upon, tell you my quick thoughts on them. I'll show you the stack here. This is unprecedented for me on this channel, having this many comics to talk about in one go. This will be very interesting to see how much I remember about all these comics. I read them in basically one sitting. Have a few notes to look at. We're going to do our best here. So getting into the first one, we have Yoda issue number 6, written by Jody Houser with artwork by Luke Ross. What I like about this issue is Yoda coming to grips with dealing with people that have visions. We have this Wookiee named Kirish that has had a vision that this Trandoshan friend, basically compadre of them, has basically gone and kill a bunch of Wookiees. That's the vision that this Wookiee has, and this Wookiee tries to get ahead of that vision by trying to literally kill their friend, this Trandoshan. And well, we see towards the end of this, we have this Trandoshan leaving with Count Dooku, discontinuing their training, trying to take themselves out of the equation, and in doing so, Yoda, who also rescued this Trandoshan, by the way, as a youngling, feels responsible for another loss of a Jedi for the Jedi Order. So it's, you know, Sifo Dyas has visions and the Jedi didn't act on them accordingly. So it's Yoda looking back at the past at this moment in time, because remember, the framing device is, I think, right before Empire, right after Empire. So that's interesting to see how he's acting upon visions, and why visions can be a little bit, you know, you try to prevent a vision and it ends up happening. So I thought that was a cool story. And that does wrap up the second arc. Next up, we're going to get one during the Clone Wars. Next up, we have Sana Starros. This is issue number 3 of the series. And of course, this is written by Justina Ireland with artwork by Pere Perez. This one's called Part 3, Good Times, part of Family Matters. And Sana Starros is going to see her aunt, which is Devilon Pop, obviously not her biological aunt, because this is a completely different species that was introduced in the High Republic as well as War of the Bounty Hunters. And she gives her and her aunt and her grandmother a mission to go basically get these zoo animals, including a Rancor, for a mission. And then doing so, she'll be able to help them out with this information about how the heck her cousin, who is now married to this Imperial officer, she's going to have this baby. This Imperial officer basically kind of kidnapped her because he wants to have the baby in Imperial custody. But there's also a reason why the cousin is there, and that is to extract information from Avon Starros. Yes, from Phase 1 of the High Republic, a great ancestor of Sana Starros. Avon has information that this family, the Starros family, wants. So we end up seeing this big altercation between this bounty hunter that eventually gets the grandmother of Sana Starros, and that's where we need to head off, is rescuing this character from this bounty hunter. And we also see Sana Starros' brother, and he is an Imperial officer, and he is the one who threw the entire family under the bus with Avon Starros' information. So a lot going on here. Continues the great story that is very unique to Star Wars comics, which is really focusing a lot on the families of Star Wars. Next up, we're going to dive into the High Republic, the last one for this current week of Star Wars comics. By the way, I'm starting off with the 3 comics that came out this week. We have Star Wars Adventures, The Nameless Terror, issue number 2 out of 4, written by George Mann. I absolutely love this story because, first off, these are longer stories. This is a $4.99 issue, same with the first issue. And we have basically these Jedi and his Pathfinder team that have crash landed on this planet with the Path of the Open Hand. Path of the Open Hand had been transporting the Nameless in eggs, and one of them has gotten out, and there's this big issue because one of the Jedi, or a couple of the Jedi, have been affected mentally, emotionally by the proximity of how close this nameless creature is. Meanwhile, you have the character of Rock, the character, this character that we first see from Quest of the Jedi, and they are running around trying to find a way out of there. And what I like about this story is it does put the focus on the non-Jedi characters as well. So you have this Pathfinder, I believe, communications officer and a Pathfinder medic that are taking center stage with actually keeping the Jedi alive, moving them around. But then you have the Path of the Open Hand, who have become militant. They are no longer considering themselves Path of the Open Hand. After the Battle of Jedha, they now see the Jedi as extremists, and now they are becoming more extreme. And now they're called like Path of the Closed Hand or the Closed Fist or something like that. So you see a lot of anger and aggression from these people. But I love the artwork. I love the coloration of all of this. Is so good. Eduardo Mello does the artwork on this. It looks fantastic, and it's great to see horror for an all ages book. I really dig this. So getting back into a previous week, I guess this came out 2 weeks ago or something, we have Star Wars The High Republic. This is issue number 8 out of 10. We are getting closer to the end, and in this we focus on the character of Vildar Mack. He is on Jedha. Following the events of the Battle of Jedha, he has stumbled upon the literal toppled Jedi statue, which is actually on top of a special Jedi antiquity kind of location crypt that holds the Rod of Daybreak, which is what the Path of the Open Hand have been around to try to get. And the Herald of the Path of the Open Hand, the Nautilus there, has now got his hands on both halves of this scepter. He has attached at the Rod of Daybreak and the Rod of Seasons together, and that's supposedly going to control the Leveler, the Nameless. And we get to see the Leveler taking the life force out of one of these Jedi Masters that has been captured. And Vildar Mack sees it with his eyes and feels the wooziness, as we said from the Nameless Terror comic, that all the Jedi feel, especially from Phase 1 with Loden Greatstorm and all that. And that is where the issue leaves off, is, oh my gosh, what is this creature doing? So yes, this issue, this storyline is really ramping up in the stakes as we see Jedi getting wounded, as we see Jedi kind of losing at this point. The Jedi are not as invincible as we would think in this day and age, in the golden age of the Jedi. Moving back to another issue that had come out in the last couple of weeks, we have Bounty Hunters. This is issue number 33. And this is a milestone issue because, as you see, you have Iden Versio from Battlefront 2, as well as Del Meeko and Gideon Hask, are getting their due once again in the sun, because they are tasked by Darth Vader to hunt down Bylar Valence, who is surrounded by his bounty hunter compatriots. So the bounty hunters have landed on this planet for repairs. I think they have gotten out of Inferno Squad's reach, but they haven't. And that's when we see Tonga go toe-to-toe with Iden Versio in melee combat. We see a lot of setup, and next issue is really going to be the climax of this, I guess, 2 or 3 part story arc of what is happening, right? Bylar Valence has the information of the Death Star 2 in his databanks, in his memory box, whatever you want to call it, because he is part droid at this point, cybernetic, and obviously the Empire can't have him getting out with that information. So it is pretty neat. Paolo Villanelli's artwork is fantastic. Ethan Sachs, who I had the pleasure of meeting with and being on a panel with at Star Wars Celebration. Man, this is one of my favorite comics. I just love the kineticism, the dynamic way that this is all written in the story and everything else. And you see Vakora actually having to go toe-to-toe with IG-88, one of my favorite droid bounty hunters. One of my favorite bounty hunters in general. All right, next up we have Star Wars issue number 33. And this will tie up this place in the storyline where they are at no space. Remember, Luke Skywalker is basically just being bashed together by the kill droid from the Nihil, this old Nihil droid left over. But he's able to overcome that using the Force. He's able to get his Force journal back. He succeeds. They all succeed. Basically, Chewie is able to repair the Nihil path drive, and they are able to combine all the Camarok convoy, which has all the valuable fuel for the Rebel Alliance's fleet. And there's kind of a sacrifice that is made. Commander Blythe, who is the patriarch of this entire community out here in no space where they can't leave, decides he's gonna stay there. But most of the community, it looks like, does go with Leia and the rebels and get out of there. And they do get out of there safely to the Rebel Alliance. And that is when Luke decides he's gonna have to fight Vader again. He feels it in his bones, and he's gonna need a better lightsaber, a lightsaber he can create himself, that really he can help tap into the Force with. So that gives us a little bit of foreshadowing of, we are going to get that moment when he builds that green lightsaber that we've all been waiting to see how that happens in canon. So that's coming down the line for that. Also, we have, and this is a big one, we have a big conclusion to the Hidden Empires, issue number 5. Just when you think Kira had the upper hand, she's able to activate the Fermata cage, trapping Emperor and Darth Vader, and they get trapped, and it's like, oh my gosh, like these Sith Lords literally can't do anything. They're in this bubble. But that is when you have the Knights of Ren decide to have a change of heart, and they decide to have an influence on this big conflict between the Crimson Dawn and the Empire, and they go and they save the Emperor and Vader by destroying the Fermata Cage, gratifying themselves with the Sith, and that's when Emperor says, okay, you saved me, I'm going to punish you by using electricity on you out of my fingertips, but I'm also going to allow you to be one of my henchmen now, and that's eventually why we see them kind of aligned with the dark side of the Force in the Rise of Skywalker and Force Awakens and all that stuff, as we see Kylo Ren working with them and working with Snoke. So yeah, it was really awesome to see this, because then you also see how once that happened and the Sith were able to escape, that's when Qi'ra puts out the call to arms and says, everybody flee, go, it's failed, we're gonna go all our separate ways, try to go undercover. And then we go flash back to the present time where we see those cloaked figures with a couple times throughout the series, and we get to see their identities as none other than Luke Skywalker and his Padawan at that point, Leia Organa Solo, and they are seeing that hologram of the character that is the right-hand person of Qi'ra, the lady with the white hair. See, there's so much to remember at this point with all these comics that I'm starting to forget names, so forgive me for that. I want to say her name is the Architect, or so. It's something with the A. Anyway, so we get to see her giving a story to Leia and Luke, obviously, after the events of Return of the Jedi. And they're just kind of going around saying, hey, if it wasn't for Qi'ra, there wouldn't have been a distraction for the Rebel Alliance to get the upper hand to eventually defeat the Empire. So in a way, it was kind of like Qi'ra that helped inadvertently helped the Rebel Alliance to succeed against the Empire. And then we see this image of Qi'ra literally sitting at this cantina, seeing the news of the Death Star 2's destruction. And obviously, that confirms that she has survived past Return of the Jedi into probably the Mandoverse, and maybe we'll see her one day in live action. I mean, come on, let's see it. I want to see Qi'ra showing up. Maybe it's not with the Crimson Dawn, but maybe she can be a valuable ally to the New Republic going forward. Next up, we have Ewoks. Yes, we have Ewoks, and this is a nice little anthology written by Alyssa Wong with a bunch of artists here. And there's 3 different stories. One of them is basically about Woklings, like the younger little Ewoks there, and they're just going around with the Duloks, and the Duloks are the arch enemies of the Ewoks, and it's a cute little story about them kind of, coming to terms, even though they're from separate peoples that could be enemies, just since they're young kids, they don't have those animosities built up, and they have this fun little relationship, friend to friend. And then the next story we have is a straight up horror story where it's just an Ewok adventuring, and then you have that creature, I believe that was from the Ewok Caravan of Courage or something like that. It was a big creature, and eventually this Ewok can't get away and gets literally eaten. So yes, it's a very violent take compared to the first tale. And that third tale, we see the character from Star Wars Last Shot, written by Daniel Jose Older, which is an Ewok called Pipka. We've seen in that novel that there's an Ewok that survived in space after Return of the Jedi and is very much part of the current climate of things and dealing with technology. So we get to see why that Ewok got out of there. So basically harnessed this technology from the Battle of Endor against the Empire and was able to repair a ship or basically cobble together the ship from an ATST head and rockets to space, and it's the end of the story there. So there's a lot of cool looks at the Ewoks, and that won't be the last time we talk about Ewoks. Just a little bit of a hint for the next couple stories here. We have Dr. Aphra, and that is the issue number 30. Issue number 30 of Dr. Aphra is a direct tie into the Hidden Empire. So out of all the comics that were coming out during the time of Hidden Empire, Dr. Aphra definitely was the most direct one that would tie in, because it dealt with the Spark Eternal, it dealt with Dr. Aphra, which we see Vader going up against, by the way, in Hidden Empire. We see it from a different angle in Dr. Aphra issue number 30. And what happens is the Null Blade, which is an Ascendant artifact, is used to basically extract this Spark Eternal out of Dr. Aphra. So this whole issue is basically what you would call as like a witchcraft seance. You have, the different characters from Magnatolva to Sanastaros, and they are kind of gathered around Aphra to recite this kind of ascendant speech thing, and in doing so extracting the Spark Eternal out of Aphra, and finally the last page is Aphra is literally crying because she has finally regained her consciousness of her own body. So she's been giving a second life, or maybe the ninth life, because she's been in so many crazy moments throughout her life with these different artifacts and different things. So I'm excited to see where this story goes. We see future storylines involving her and Luke Skywalker in the same page, so in the same story. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Now, this issue is something that you could have only picked up at Star Wars Celebration, at least for the time being, and that is the Star Wars Hyperspace Stories Annual number 1. This is Jackson Annual. Funnily enough, this came out during Celebration, which was during the weekend of Easter, so hey, we got a green rabbit to celebrate the little bunny there on Easter. So that was fun. This issue is going to be coming out in a couple months for everybody to buy, and it's going to have a different cover, but this is a cover by Mike Mignola. By the way, this is written by Cavan Scott. So this issue, I'm not a huge fan of Jackson, but I will admit I actually really enjoyed this story. So this is after events of Return of the Jedi. The Ewoks have been kind of in disarray because their leader, Chief Chirpa, has mysteriously disappeared for a year, and now you have these upstart Ewoks that are trying to take over, even though you have the descendant of Chief Chirpa, I want to say Pipka or something, something with a P, I believe, and she is the rightful heir, and they're trying to usurp her, and they're getting very violent about doing it. There's Ewoks fighting Ewoks, so Jackson is tasked by none other than Hansel and Leia Organa, who want him to get out of their hair because he's frankly annoying them. He's like, okay, we'll give you something to do. How about we team you up with C-3PO? And so it's C-3PO, who is the golden god, and you get that acknowledgement when he goes down there. The Ewoks are like, oh my gosh, it's the golden rod, it's the golden god, and all this stuff. And it's Jackson who's very ambivalent, he's very apathetic against his cause, why he's even there. But towards the end of it, he goes to the Dulocs and ends up, the enemies of the Ewoks, thinking that that's where Chief Chirpa was last seen, finds them there, but also finds that there was Ewoks that were complacent in, or compliant in this whole scheme to basically act like the Dulocs got them, so they can end up becoming their own leaders and usurping the power of the Ewoks hierarchy, right? So it was very cool because you get Jackson, who's then glorified by the Dulocs and doing this crazy one-shot kick to the head of a chief of the Dulocs, is able to get their respect, and then we see him getting a statue towards the end of this. But yeah, Jackson, I got a lot more respect for the character after this story, I gotta admit, and it was a really good single standalone extra large story, so definitely pick this one when it comes up. But I think with that, I did an okay job. Would you agree with just glancing over 10 comics? I don't even know how long it's been, but it's probably been at least 15 minutes at this point of talking straight up about Star Wars comics. This was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Which comic most impressed you? Because we went through the entire bevy of Star Wars comics at this point, minus I think Hyperspace Stories, but we did get the annual. But anyway, I digress. So yes, I'm going to be having a lot more Star Wars content coming through the pipe over the next couple weeks as I finally catch up to a lot of things. I have a review for Quest for Planet X on the channel right now. I have my full panel at Star Wars Celebrations called Bounty Hunters, Smugglers, and Gangsters, the Scum and Villainy through the years. So you can watch that in its entirety. Go check it out. And without further ado, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you like this content and you want to see more about Star Wars. This is the place to check that stuff out. That's going to do it for me, Startup. Thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you always. Thanks for checking out the video. Please hit that thumbs up symbol. It helps me know that I'm making content that you guys enjoy. And if you enjoyed this video, I also include 2 videos down below you guys should check out. And please consider subscribing to this channel. It helps support me, and it notifies you guys of when I get new videos up on the channel. You can also contact me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at StarRaptor.